following subject matter is real and only intended for mature audiences. Discretion is advised.
People are dead after deputies say a man went on a shooting rampage.
I knew a week before she died I was going to kill her.
I can tell you the scene out there is absolutely horrific.
Nobody knows where this individual may strike next.
This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. My name is Joe. I'm the host, and thanks for joining today. And as usual, with an influx of new listeners to 10-Minute Murder, I get a various amount of questions about different things, specifically relating to this show. And the number one being, why are the episodes only 10 minutes long? And it's a good question, and the answer is because I like short episodes. Selfishly, I created a podcast that I would like. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy the podcasts that are, 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half long. I even like the ones that are multiple episodes in a whole big series that take 7-8 hours to listen to. But who's got that kind of time on a daily basis? I certainly don't. And I figure that other people don't either, but they still want to get their true crime story fix in. So that's why I created this podcast. If you've got a little bit of ADHD and can't really focus on one thing for too long, this is probably a good podcast for you. I can sympathize. And another question I get is, you call this podcast 10-Minute Murder, but sometimes the episodes are like 12 or 13 minutes long. Explain that. And that's not really a question, that's more of a statement. And first of all, how dare you? But the answer is, sometimes it takes me a minute or two longer to tell the story. If it's at all possible for me to cut down the information and give it to you in 10 minutes or less, I will 100% of the time do that. But if I think that I'm leaving stuff out that would be a pretty key part to the story, I don't. I just make it just a couple minutes longer. And every once in a while, I throw a huge curveball at you and make an episode like 40 minutes long. So if you're new, then that's kind of what you can expect around here. We have rules, but the boundaries are very gray. 10 minutes doesn't always mean 10 minutes. And by the way, the 10 minutes that I'm talking about doesn't include the time that I'm talking like right now. I don't include this part in that 10 minutes. And now let's get to today's story. When a lifeless body is discovered with a total of 20 stab wounds, a knife still rammed 4 inches into the chest, most of us would think that's a homicide. Pretty cut and dry. Let's go find the killer. But as absurd as it sounds, that was not the case with 27-year-old Ellen Greenberg, who was found dead in a luxury 6th-floor apartment in Philadelphia in 2011. Despite her numerous injuries and a scene indicating otherwise, the police quickly ruled the case a suicide. Still, after over a decade, her parents are fighting to find the truth about what really happened to their daughter. Ellen Ray Greenberg was born June 23, 1983, in New York City to Joshua and Sandra Greenberg, who both work in the dental field. Ellen's parents described her as a girly girl who was very energetic and exceptionally kind and a nurturing soul. With these characteristics, it was natural for Ellen to get into teaching. It didn't take too long before she had a classroom full of students who absolutely adored her. When Ellen then met a man named Samuel Goldberg, a producer at NBC, and quickly fell in love, life seemed pretty good. She was happy. After 3 years of being together, the couple decided to get engaged. Ellen's father, Josh, said that his daughter and Sam were thrilled. The wedding was planned to happen August of 2011. However, Ellen and Sam never got to say their vows. On January 26, 2011, Philadelphia was hit with a massive blizzard, and Ellen was sent home from her work at Juanita Park Academy early. When Ellen got to their apartment, she spent some time with Sam before he took off to go work out at 4:45 p.m. Sam returned 45 minutes later, only to find out, according to him, that he had been locked out of his home. As Sam tried to unlock the door, it only budged a few inches as the apartment's swing bar lock was engaged from the inside. Frustrated, Sam banged on the door, getting no response before calling and then texting Ellen the following messages. "Hello? Open the door. What are you doing? I'm getting pissed. Hello? You better have an excuse. What the F? Ah, you have no idea." As time passed without a response, Sam went to the lobby and spoke with Phil Hanton, 67, the lone security guard that night. Sam had hoped that Phil could help him break the lock, but it was against company policy, so he refused. Sam kept asking several times before he eventually returned to the apartment and broke down the door himself. Inside, he was welcomed by a gruesome scene. There on the kitchen floor sat Ellen, with her head, neck, and shoulders propped up against corner cabinets and her legs splayed in front of her. In her left hand, Ellen held tightly a nearly spotless white towel. While Sam did not yet know what happened, he could tell that his fiancée was dead, and so he dialed 911 at 6:33 p.m. The dispatch instructed Sam to begin chest compressions instantly. However, he allegedly asked, "Do I have to?" Also, 3 minutes into the call, Sam suddenly told the operator that there was a knife sticking out of Ellen's chest. Of course, the CPR had to be stopped immediately, but how was it possible that Sam had not noticed the blade? Regardless, there was nothing anyone could have done to save Ellen. When authorities arrived 7 minutes after the call began, she was pronounced dead at the scene. Following the autopsy, the extent of Ellen's injuries was revealed. She had been stabbed altogether 20 times, 10 in the back of her neck, 8 times in the chest, once in the abdomen, and once across the scalp. A 10-inch serrated knife had been sticking 4 inches deep into Ellen's chest when she had been discovered. Initially, the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office ruled the case as a homicide. Yes, you heard me right. Ellen's death was initially ruled as a homicide, as it probably should have been. But the Philadelphia Police Department quickly backed away, saying, no, Ellen did this to herself. And so the case was officially ruled a suicide in February 2011. Of course, the police had to have some kind of evidence to back up their version of the events. During the investigation, it was uncovered that Ellen was suffering from anxiety, and she had visited a therapist who prescribed her Klonopin, an anti-anxiety medication. She had also told her parents that she felt like moving back in with them in Harrisburg without Sam, which was weird for a woman who was supposedly planning her wedding. Still, Ellen didn't tell her parents any more details about what was going on. She just said it had nothing to do with Sam. Ellen's medication seemed to help for a while, but then her anxiety came back with a force. According to her therapist, the problems were caused by Ellen's struggles with a couple of difficult students. Things were so bad that she even considered resigning from her position. However, if there was anything wrong between her and Sam, Ellen didn't tell it to her therapist. So basically, Ellen being treated for anxiety was enough proof that the police needed to determine that she was depressed and committed suicide. That added to the fact that there was no evidence of forced entry, no defense wounds, no blood outside of the kitchen area, no one else's DNA on the handle of the knife other than Ellen's, and that Sam had remained on scene and was cooperative, making the police not see any other possibilities. But there is one question, and it's a big one. Who kills themselves the way that police claim Ellen did? According to the Suicide Prevention Resource Center, most women who commit suicide do it by firearm, drugs, or suffocation. And even if they chose a knife, they don't stab themselves 20 times, especially in the back of the neck, which is anatomically extremely difficult to do. Also, it was noted that the stabs went through Ellen's clothing. As Chief Deputy Coroner for Montgomery County, Gregory McDonald said, quote, "Most people, if they inflict the wounds themselves, they pull the clothes up. They don't go through the clothing." Ellen's parents were 100% sure from the start their daughter did not commit suicide. And so they began their own investigation by hiring an attorney, Joe Pedraza, and a forensic pathologist, Cyril West. The police's theory quickly started to fall apart as Cyril determined one stab found had penetrated Ellen's cranial cavity, which would have meant immense pain and a loss of consciousness. So how does one stab themselves if they're passed out? And if that damning evidence was not enough, neuropathologist Lindsay Emery, who was later hired by the state, concluded that Ellen was not even alive anymore when she received some of the stab wounds. Lindsay Emery, what's significant here is that there's no hemorrhage. Attorney Joe Pedraza, and in your experience, no hemorrhage can equate to the person having been deceased at the time of the administration of the trauma? Lindsay, yeah, in general, no hemorrhage means no pulse. And Joe added, people without pulses don't stab themselves repeatedly. It was also curious that Sam had said when he found Ellen, she was on the floor sitting upright against the kitchen cabinets. But how did she then have a dried bloodstain found running horizontally down her cheek, from her nostril to her ear? Has she been moved? Of course, there was no luminol test conducted, so we can't know for sure if the scene was cleaned. Sam also called 2 other numbers before calling 911, his parents and his uncle, a lawyer, claiming he had kicked in the door with the guard of the building and found Ellen. except that there were no signs of the apartment door indicating a forced entry. Just a single screw was missing from the safety latch, and the guard never left his downstairs post. The day after the discovery, Sam's uncle and cousin returned to the apartment to get him a suit for the funeral. However, they left with not just Sam's laptop, but also with Ellen's 2 laptops and her cell phone. The police only took possession of the devices on January 29th, 2 days after being taken. A model example of outstanding police work and how to break the chain of evidence. Nevertheless, Sam has never been a suspect in the case and has never done any interviews. As you can tell, there is a ridiculous amount of unanswered questions and weird details that apparently didn't interest the authorities at all. As investigative analyst Todd Brennan, who also works pro bono for the Greenberg family, said, quote, "They came in, looked around, said, 'suicide,' and left." It's not a surprise Ellen's parents, Josh and Sandra, have been viciously fighting against the official conclusion of the case for a decade. Finally, they scored a significant legal victory in January of 2020, when a Philadelphia judge ruled that they could move forward with a lawsuit against the city's medical examiner to get Ellen's official cause of death, in this case, suicide, removed from the record. As Ellen's father said, "There's a murderer out there, a killer, somebody who brutally attacked somebody with multiple stab wounds and let her bleed to death and left her for dead." The trial was scheduled to begin later in 2021, and the investigation is still ongoing. Josh and Sandra wants the jury to take a close look at all the evidence they've gathered during the years and reach the same conclusion. Ellen Greenberg did not kill herself. That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. And I hope this case frustrates you as much as it frustrates me. I cannot believe that someone can be stabbed 20 times and be proven by experts that the person was dead at the time of some of the stabbings, and you still call it a suicide. Make it make sense. Hey, if you are new to this podcast or have not yet subscribed, I hope you'll do that. Wherever you're listening right now, click the subscribe button. And it doesn't always say subscribe. It might say subscribe, but it also might say collect or follow or something like that. And on Apple Podcasts, top right-hand corner, there's a plus button. You can click that, and that'll help you follow this podcast. And when you become a subscriber, you won't miss any future episodes of 10-Minute Murder. You can also connect with the podcast on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can find the links for that in the show notes of this episode. Or just as easy, you can go to Facebook or Instagram or whatever and type in right there where you normally would type in your ex when you're stalking your ex. Don't do that. But type in 10-Minute Murder and it'll pop right up. You're probably going to hurt your own feelings anyway if you're stalking your ex on Facebook. So don't do that. Just search for 10-Minute Murder and follow there. And I haven't mentioned this in a while, but if you've got a story suggestion for me to cover on 10-Minute Murder, you can email it to me. You can also send it to me via message on any of those social media platforms, but you can also email it to me if that's easier for you, 10minutemurder@gmail.com. 10minutemurder@gmail.com. All right, I'm going to stop talking because Harper, my dog, is snoring so loud in the background that it's going to get to the point where I can't cover it up. Thank you for listening to 10-Minute Murder. Stay safe and good night.
10-minute murder. 10-minute murder.